active listening. You can't ask great questions if you aren't really listening. It made me call her back the next morning. 3 months later, Tom, we had a one-to-one and she came in my office and she said, "You likely saved my marriage and my husband's life." When I think about what makes a great leader, it's about the connection that they have with their employees.
Welcome to The Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today, I'm excited to have Dr. Lori Armstrong on the podcast to discuss how asking the right question is fundamental to great communication. Dr. Armstrong earned her Doctor of Nursing practice with a concentration in executive leadership at Drexel University. She's held executive level and senior leadership roles at Kaiser Permanente, Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital, and Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, Stanford. Now she's the CEO and Chief Clinical Officer of Inspire Nurse Leaders, which seeks to equip nurse leaders and their teams to achieve great outcomes for themselves and their organizations. She serves on several national boards and has received multiple awards, including the Silicon Valley Woman of Distinction Award. Dr. Armstrong, thanks for joining me today on The Science of Leadership.
Well, thank you for having me, Tom. I'm thrilled to be here.
Jumping into today's topic, one of the 4 C's of leadership that I've identified in my research is communication, which is the heart of what I'm hoping we can talk about. More specifically, I'm particularly interested in discussing the importance that asking the right question plays in leadership. What are your thoughts on the value of asking the right question?
Well, I love that question that you asked. What are my thoughts on asking the right question? You know, part of my role now at Inspire Nurse Leaders is supporting and growing nursing and healthcare leaders. Communication and how to be present is always, always top of mind. Like it's a struggle, especially in the busyness of every day. And one of my favorite quotes came to mind with your question, Tom, and that is a quote from George Bernard Shaw. And his quote is, "The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it actually occurred." Right? I love that. I love that because to me, it gets to the heart of asking the right question. Because when you ask the right questions, the first benefit of asking the right questions and powerful questions is clarity of understanding. So as a coach myself, as an executive coach, you know, I always teach my amazing coachees. I don't like to call them
I don't like that term either.
Coachees, is that, you know, the message you are trying to deliver isn't always accurately received the way you wish it was received, especially in those so many emotionally charged conversations that people have, right? At work, if you're having a coaching conversation with one of your direct reports. So it's a little bit of an emotionally charged or stressful situation. So the communicator is stressed and perhaps might not be delivering the information the way they think they're delivering it. And then the way it's received, you know, when we're all stressed, like your brain kind of narrows, your focus narrows. So asking the right questions is vital. And I believe, and I always teach on this, is that it's actually a critical component of good relationships, right? So asking the right questions, because it shows that you're involved. It shows that the conversation is important enough for you to be asking more clarifying questions. Vitally important.
Yeah. As an executive leadership coach myself, as soon as you said some of the things there, just with regard to coaching, it's like, okay, we've had the same kind of question, your powerful questions. That's one of
Yes.
that was the term that I was like, what was the term exactly? So it's powerful questions,
Yes.
which is something that we went over in my the coaching training program as well. But yeah, the ability, as you say, to be in the moment, to be
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to people and the scenario enough that you ask what seems to be a really simple question most of the time that unlocks everything. And you hit on a concept that I really have written about in this book that I've been working on, and that is the multiple factors that influence our communication and really disrupt our communication. And
Mm-hmm.
I call those frames, filters, and factors. And so it's all
Mm,
three F's, and it's how we frame things, how they frame things, the filters that we use when we're speaking, the filters
absolutely.
they process through, and then all the noise and everything else in between. So absolutely, those do get in the way, and we have to be thoughtful about them. As as we're thinking about this, asking the right questions, do you have a story that really showcases how, asking the right question has had an important impact for you or for someone else?
I do actually, and I share it publicly or widely when I'm talking about, and you used a word, one of my favorite words for leaders is influence, right? I think we don't always recognize the influence we have, right? Good influence or negative influence, right? It's a very meaningful and powerful story. I'll tell it, but to me, it reminds me of the impact and influence you have on others and might not always recognize it. My history you shared as a nurse leader, and I had the honor of being a chief nursing officer. So I always describe it as the nurse in charge of all the nurses, right? And healthcare providers. So I had an honor of serving in that role for nearly 12 years.
Mhm.
So one day, one of my direct reports texted me. I'd been working with her for nearly 10 years, and she texted me and said she wasn't feeling well. She wasn't going to be coming in that day. And of course, I acknowledged it. Hope everything's okay. Keep me posted. Just general. And 2 or 3 days went by, and I didn't think another thing about it, Tom. I didn't think another thing about it. And I walked by her office to talk to her because I hadn't heard from her again.
Yeah.
And they said, no, she's been out for the last 3 or 4 days. And it just struck me because that I was surprised that she hadn't texted me again and that she wasn't in. And she rarely missed work. Extremely high performer, and just rarely, was always there for her team.
Mhm.
So I went back to my office and I called her. And she answered the phone and I said, "Hi, it's Lori. I'm just checking in. I found that you've been out all week. And I want to know how you're doing and how I can help."
Mhm.
Because it was so unusual. And her response to me, it's even giving me chills right now, Tom, retelling the story. And it was many years ago. Her response to me was, "I'm fine. If I needed help, I would have called you." And she hung up the phone.
Mm.
So I was taken aback. And actually, I'm confessing this live on your podcast that I was a little frustrated, a little annoyed that I was reaching out, asking
Yeah.
how I could help. And I got that kind of response. But then I went home and reflected and got over myself and past myself, which is important. I
Yeah.
really value reflection as a leader these days,
Yeah.
as I've gotten much more, many years of experience. Reflection is a key learning tool. I can't highlight that enough, underscore that enough. When I thought about such an unusual response from someone that we were close colleagues
Mhm.
for a long time, it made me call her back the next morning and say, "I appreciate you sharing with me. You would have let me know. I need you to know that I don't expect you to share everything with me, but I want to remind you that employee assistance is available for everyone. Something inside me, because I asked how I can help her, she just, her reaction was not her. And I said, I just want to remind you that employee assistance is for everyone, not just the frontline staff. It's there for everyone, leaders included. I said, and that's all I wanted to share. I gave her the number and I hung up. She didn't say a word. And she came back to work the next week. And 3 months later, Tom, 3 months, we had a one-to-one, and she came in my office and she said, Lori, I've never been able to talk to you about when you asked me how you could help me when I was out for that week. And I wanted to share with you that you likely saved my marriage and my husband's life. Now, for those listeners, I don't want this to seem dramatic and it's about me. It's not about me. I have a tear in my eye telling the story because it's so true. She said, my husband was having substance abuse issues that I didn't want to talk about. And it never occurred to me to use employee assistance. And we were at the point of losing our 30-year marriage. And after you called and just, gave me that feedback, employee assistance saved the both of us, myself and my husband. And I thanked her for sharing that. That was very vulnerable for her to do that. Sure. And after she left, it made me think about one question. That's all I asked, was one question. How can I help? Not asking what's wrong with you. Did you call? Did you document it in time and attendance? You've exceeded the allotted amount. A lot of those like manager type things that many of us, no, how can I help? And it has stuck with me for all these years. It was many years ago, Tom.
I think that's one of the most powerful questions we can, as leaders, ask is, how can I help? And I think that there are a couple of things that I take note of and thanks for sharing that story. That is a powerful story. I really appreciate that. The couple things that I take note of are, A, you cared. And that's one of the 4 C's. I mentioned that communication is one, caring is one, and our listeners who've listened to other podcast episodes on here on the Science of Leadership know it's character, competence, caring, and communication are the 4 C's of leadership. But anyway, so you cared, and that changed the trajectory of your conversation. It changed the trajectory, apparently, of this lady's marriage and life. And so the value of that. The other thing was, there's a hidden question in there. And that's the question that you asked yourself, in a sense. You stepped back and said, what's wrong with this picture? What is missing here? This doesn't fit. Right? And I think that when we take those moments and we step back and we ask ourselves that question, that opens up an opportunity for us to really, really learn something that could change everything. And so as you were saying that, and I was thinking about that, it reminds me of a story also. And my story isn't leadership per se, but it gets to the heart of this idea of, what am I missing? What is not right with this scenario? And so this actually comes from a patient experience a decade ago or so. And so I was more than a decade, I think. And so I was in clinic and I was working with a fellow, and for those folks that are listening who aren't in the medical domain, a fellow is a person who's training to become, in this scenario, training to become a pediatric cardiologist. So I'm working with this person and trying to teach him skills to become a pediatric cardiologist. And so that's the setting. And so what happened was, there was this patient who was referred to me by another cardiologist elsewhere, because he didn't have a good answer for why at 15 years old, this person was feeling fatigued and had a pericardial effusion. So again, for the non-medical folks, she had fluid around her heart for no good reason that was apparent. And so when she came to clinic, the person training, went in to evaluate her and talked with her and did an examination and all these sorts of things. And he came back out and he said, everything checks out. I don't really find anything other than the fact that there's this pericardial effusion or fluid around the heart. And so I went into the room and met her and her mom. And I said, I got one question for you, just one question. And she said, okay, what's the question? And I said, do you ever sweat at nighttime? And she said, yeah, I do. And I said, okay, do you ever sweat so much that it soaks the bed sheets that you have to actually, you're grinding, you get up and you change the bed sheets and you change your clothes? Yeah, I do. Okay. How long has that been going on? That's been going on some months, probably 5 months. I said, and if I remember right, that's about the same amount of time that you've been fatigued. It's the same time frame that you quit playing soccer because you were tired. Is that right? Yeah. I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send you to the lab to get a blood test, and I'll talk to you, you and your mom after we get the result back. And so the fellow and I walked out of the room, and I looked at him and I said, she's got cancer. And so that's what her lab test showed. And so she got a bone marrow examination, and that revealed she had leukemia. Now, I'm not a cancer doctor. I'm a heart doctor. And this isn't to showcase me.
Right.
But it's to demonstrate asking the single right question changes everything.
Yeah.
And in that case, it changed the outcome for a teenager and her family forever.
Forever.
So this idea of stopping as leaders and saying, what doesn't fit here? What am I missing? What's the right question?
Right. Wow,
So
Tom, that story's pretty amazing. And it made me think, first of all, I love your model. But it made me think that you cared enough to critically think, like, what piece of the puzzle is missing? What else do I have to know? And it also, what I also want to share is we are living in a time of utter distraction. Distraction. And, because I come from healthcare like you, I know the busyness of the hospital. I know what it takes. You're not just rounding on one patient, or you're not just seeing one patient in clinic. You're seeing, 20 for the day. I don't know the exact number, but anyway, and that translates to other industries as well. Today is a day of unprecedented change, unprecedented pace, and utter distraction 24/7, whether it's our Apple Watch or our phone or the email after email. And I think leaders in particular are at great risk of seeing the consequences of that. And one of the consequences of that is not slowing down enough to critically think about what else do I need to ask? What is that question?
Yeah. I think you're onto something really important there. Is it's easy to get really caught up in doing.
Yes.
And not thinking about what you need to be doing. What are the really important things as a leader that we need to be thinking about and doing? So yeah, I think that's all vitally important. Well, we've named a couple of ways, right? We've given a couple of stories where asking the right question has changed the outcome. As you think about this idea, what do you see as the benefits for leaders in asking the right question? I mean, we've given some high level things, but
right. Well, I could go on forever with this question. So you're going to have to tell me to be quiet, Lori. So, when I think about the importance of asking the right questions as leaders, it makes me think about what actually makes a great leader, right? So when I think about what makes a great leader, it's about the connection that they have with their employees. You can call it engagement. You can call it morale. Use, whatever word you'd like to, whatever descriptor. But the connection you make with your team, right? That's what makes an okay leader, a good leader, a great leader, right? Mm-hmm. And, when I put it through the lens of asking questions shows your team that, number one, you care enough about them to ask a question, whether it's, how was your vacation? How was your child's graduation? Like, that personal piece about them. Or tell me what's the most challenging part of your day, right? Or, okay, let's talk. And then, okay, so you're asking the question. The follow up and follow through is everything. It's everything. Absolutely. Because if you just ask and you take no action, it's going to actually erode whatever respect, trust you had with that person or with the team. So asking the right questions and showing that you're caring, number one. I would say the second benefit for leaders, like what makes a great leader, and I would say that when you show you care and you're asking questions about what's important to them, mm-hmm. right? How you can help them. Absolute trust builder. And, I just actually did a talk on influence, comes back to that word influence again. And I spent probably a third of the session, it was a 1-hour session, a third of it teaching and talking about trust. And a lot of the data is pretty concerning about the trust in employees with their direct manager declining significantly, but the trust between the employee and senior leadership, even lower percentages of trust. So this one author called it a trust crisis. We have a trust crisis in organizations, especially larger organizations. Mm-hmm. So when a leader takes the time to be present with their team and ask important questions, it might be an important question to the leader, but make sure it's an important question to the person you're talking to.
Right.
I always tell leaders, it's actually not about them.
Right.
It's all about how you show up for your team, right?
Yeah.
And asking those questions, great trust builder, because trust is at the core of every relationship. And we all know that leadership is a relationship. So it's like all connected, right?
Right. 100%.
Did I just come up with a fifth C? Connected? I'm just kidding.
No, that's good. This idea of trust is one, I'll tell you, it just keeps coming up here on the Science of Leadership.
Yes.
I don't think every single episode that we've done so far, but the majority, I think, at this point, we've really hammered on trust and given folks some resources, various books and papers that really describe the effect of trust. So it absolutely is important. As I think about this, I think it's probably important for me to clarify for our listeners that when we talk about asking the right question, there's this implicit component that is asking it the right way. And you've kind of demonstrated that. The right question will likely do us very little good if we ask it in a threatening or condemnatory manner, which happens a lot, I think. If we're defensive or agitated or harried or whatever it may be. So we have to ask that question in such a way that it shows we're genuinely interested in the person and in their answer. There's a big difference between an agitated, "What are you doing?" and an interested, "What are you doing?" So we need to keep that in mind, because how we ask our questions has tremendous impact on not only the answers we might get, but also, as you were saying, on the relationship that we have with the other person. So that's something that's easy to forget, I think, for all of us.
I agree. And there's one other piece, Tom, that I always like to share, and that is, asking questions exactly the way you just described it, with positive intent and empathy and caring. Um, it it helps you learn the challenges of the person that you're meeting with, and it gives you, as the leader, the opportunity to help them navigate through whatever challenge it is, and maybe guide them to opportunities for them to grow. So never pass up the chance to help others grow. And the information you gather from those right questions, it multiplies those opportunities.
Yeah, multiplies the opportunities to help folks grow, and there are a host of positive things that happen actually when we are able to ask the right
Yes.
questions. People have studied this, and we here on the Science of Leadership always try to give people, as the name would imply, some science behind it. And so
Yes.
when people have looked at this as far as what's important, having, asking the right questions, how that impacts successful communication. In the studies, when the right question is asked in the right way,
Yes.
there are a number of positive effects. And so I'm going to share 5. And as always,
Great.
we'll have the references in the show notes and description and so forth. But first, asking the right question enhances critical thinking and problem solving. So
Mhm.
this Colby, Toffel, Grell, and colleagues show that when we ask the right questions in the right manner, it improves our critical thinking. And this actually is the concept that underlies something you'll be familiar with, the age-old Socratic method of teaching. Now, that may have fallen out with some generations, but for eons, that has been a tremendously valuable teaching thing, and it's important for helping with critical
Mhm.
thinking. So that's one thing. A second thing, perhaps somewhat obviously, when we ask the right question, it facilitates understanding and clarification.
Mhm.
And that's been shown in a number of studies by various investigators. Looking specifically at our role as leaders when we ask questions, instead of give answers, which we're prone to do sometimes, we encourage engagement and participation in the people that we're trying to lead. And that's something that Richard Ryan and Edward Deasy
Mhm.
studied. And they found that when leaders are curious and ask
Mhm.
questions, it increases a sense of competence,
Mhm.
autonomy, and relatedness among
Yes.
those we're leading. So those 3 things, competence, autonomy, and relatedness, increase engagement and participation among our team.
Mhm.
And that builds stronger relationships and fosters innovation. All those things are just, from asking non-threatening questions in a curious and interested manner.
Mhm.
And that seems like a leadership no-brainer to me, if you
Mhm.
wanted to think of it that way. So all those come together as just a few of really important things that we can achieve or gain from asking
Yes.
questions. And a word that keeps coming up, and you'll know this from coaching training, is curious.
Yes. I love that. And if I could just touch on a couple things you said, it was
Sure.
so important. Gaining clarity and understanding. You know, we think about diversity in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
particularly now in current culture and society. Diversity of thought is essential, and asking the right questions, when you think about it through the lens of seeking to understand or even curiosity, it aids in your ability to have diverse thought and diverse perspectives, and gets everyone to a greater whatever product, solution,
Mhm.
outcome, because you're seeking the perspective of a variety of stakeholders, whether they're your team or a board or the community that you're serving. It's so important. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on is, as you said, there's a lot of data related to asking questions in the right way at the right time and following through on the relationship to engagement.
Mhm.
And, the pipeline of workers in many industries is pretty tenuous right now.
Yeah.
Certainly in my industry that I work in healthcare, it is critically weak, the
Mhm.
pipeline, particularly in nursing and nursing leadership. So this leadership no-brainer that you said, really, it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
Just a little bit of time to understanding and learning the nuances of it, really, really invaluable.
Yeah. You hit on, and that's the thing with so much real leadership, is it very little of it actually costs much at all. We spend untold treasures on all sorts of programs and this, that, and the other. And a lot of times it's just really pretty simple stuff. It's just knowing to do it and knowing how to do it and actually doing it. And so I guess that's a great segue into the next question that I had, which, we've shared stories and about asking the right questions and covered the value of it from a scientific standpoint. And so that question is, what advice do you have for our listeners who want to get better at asking the right questions and being better communicators?
So before I get into the details, what I wanted to zoom out a little bit for people listening.
Yeah.
And, we'll give you great tips on how to get better at asking questions, but zooming out because assuming that most leaders are very, very busy, double booked, triple booked. I always tell people I deserve a PhD in calendar forensics of my leader clients. It is incredible the pace at which organizations work today, especially for senior leaders or executives. And I encourage them to think about communication in several ways. And one of them is presence, how you show up, right? How you show up virtually at meetings, or how you show up in the department, and how you show up closest to where the work is being done. How do you look? How are you? What's the energy you're bringing? Are you prepared? Preparation. That's my first big tip about asking great questions or how to get better at it, is slowing down enough to prepare. When you're showing up or logging into a committee meeting, are you aware of the agenda? Did you think and reflect about the content that's being discussed and who is sharing information? Because most of us, and you alluded to it a little bit before, will jump in and offer solutions before we'll ever ask questions. It's natural. It's human nature, right? And, I encourage people to think about how you're showing up, what energy you're bringing in, how you prepare, right? And active listening. You can't ask great questions if you aren't really listening. And
seems simple enough.
I know. And I always say the best communication class I ever went to, Tom, and I've been to many, the best communication class I ever went to was one that 3/4 of the first day was on how to listen better. I mean, it was really pretty amazing. And to fully understand what active listening really is, being present, not being distracted, being naturally curious, you spoke so well about, but also listening without judgment. So we all are judging. Someone says something that is not of our opinion, or you don't think it's completely accurate, or how dare they, whatever you're bringing to that meeting or that conversation. It's vitally important to really be actively listening to that person. You have to be present and truly listening. Just vital. All of those are components to getting you to the place of being able to ask accurate and reflective questions. And when I think about active listening, one of the strategies that I share with leaders is that playing back what you think the speaker said, right? It will help you have more of a precise question, but it will also add such value to the speaker. Like, oh, they really were listening to what I said. It gives the speaker more confidence. It shows that you care about them and their leadership and your relationship with them. That's pretty invaluable. So when you play something back, it gives you the opportunity to learn more, to show that you value what is being said, and it helps you have a more a precise question. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%. I agree. This idea that we need to, as you say, reflect back, that active listening, not parrot in a sense
No.
of just this some sort of rote thing, which can happen when people have done communication classes.
Yes.
It's just repeat back what they said, and that can be patronizing, I think. And so really digesting it.
Yes.
And the other thing is not feeling that you have to respond.
Yeah. That's
Just
a really
letting it
good
sit,
point. Yes.
Something that I've in the research that I've done in the book that I was working on, I kind of came to this idea of imagine that this person has the answer to a very important problem that you're facing. How can you ask a question to them in such a way that they will want to give you that answer?
Mm.
That helps me to change my mindset as I go into it, So it's okay. It doesn't matter who the person is. They have
Right.
some amount of information about a
Yes.
given situation that you don't
Yes.
have.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be the information that unlocks everything you need unlocked.
Right. I love that thought. It helps you filter. You used the word filter earlier, and I love that. And it goes both ways. Filter for the the person who's communicating the message or asking the question, and then the one who has it all. Filter is a big deal. You know, it made me think about you and I both have used the word coach, right? And we both coach leaders, right? And I think the word coach or powerful questions, I think sometimes that scares people because they're like, oh, I'm not a coach. How do you do that? Right. And what we use in one of our programs, I've grown to love a lot because it's so highly effective. And we use a peer-to-peer coaching model. So I love that because it, like what we said before, it doesn't take an expert. And we train teams and colleagues on how to coach each other. And the peer coaching model all comes down to about 5 or 6 questions.
Right.
5 or 6 questions so that, let's say you and I are in I come to you, Tom, with a challenging issue, right? Instead of you I tell you the issue, instead of you saying, Lori, oh, I dealt with that. This is what you need to do. And I was guilty of responding just like that years ago, maybe over a decade ago. I was very guilty of that. And sometimes probably still am guilty, if I'm being totally honest. But the peer coaching method trains people who care enough about getting, learning more and helping others. And I think most of us could say that we fit in that category, but through a series of 5 or 6 questions, it helps the person that has the challenge get to the answer almost by themselves, maybe with a little bit of guidance, but it brings it out of them. And it helps them critically think, another concept you already raised, but critically think by someone asking them very structured and guided questions. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. That's good. And it is beneficial for those sorts of practices. I've seen that work. And it's just as you say, it really is a very small set of questions, even as coaches, that we would ask and and get amazing answers. And the answers aren't for us. They're never for us. They're for the person we're trying to coach. So, well, I have this list of 10 tips that I wanted to give our listeners for asking the right questions in a way that will help you get great answers. And so, after I kind of run through these, I'd like to get your thoughts on them, if you will. But the first is Tailor your questions to the person and the context. Generic questions leave you looking like you're out of touch and are unlikely to yield an improved relationship or the kind of answers that will be most beneficial. So that's the first one. Second one, be clear and specific. The right answer to the wrong question is unlikely to be helpful. The third, ask open-ended questions. You're unlikely to learn anything from a yes or no answer. Number 4, be curious, not judgmental. We've hit on that one. Curiosity fosters communication, allows people to answer honestly and fully, whereas judgment shuts down communication. Number 5, use reflective questions. And you've done a great job of this, even as we've been talking. You said you were concerned about this. What is it about this that makes you concerned? That flows into the next point, number 6, which is ask for clarification when needed. We hit on that one already. Number 7, stay neutral. Don't ask leading questions. Remember that your position of leadership carries influence on people, and that can incline people to give you answers they think you want to hear.
Yes.
You'll learn nothing by having people tell you what you want to hear, and you will have wasted only time, yours and the person's you're listening to. Number 8, time the question appropriately. The right question at the wrong time is the wrong question. Number 9, ask what else. There's often so much more to the story. Give the person the opportunity to recall and give a fuller answer by asking what else. Number 10, ask solution-oriented questions. Questions like, how do you think we could solve this problem? Or if you were in my position, what would you do? Can result in profoundly helpful insights and information. What's more, they demonstrate confidence in the other person and empower them to think bigger and to believe in themselves. So those are the 10 tips for asking the right questions and getting great answers. So Lori, I'm really interested. Do you have any of those that strike you as particularly valuable?
Well, several of them did, actually. And I would say, in number 5 and 6, you said, for the 5th question, you said, ask reflective questions. Like you said, you were concerned about this. What is it about it? And then number 6 was ask for clarification. So they're kind of under the same umbrella of clarification. And this is so vitally important, not to assume that you know things. So, when I was in hospital leadership, we would have a committee formed about X, Y, and Z. So I would say, let me use an example. So we're having a problem with throughput, meaning how quickly can we get a patient who needs a hospital bed from the emergency department to an actual hospital bed. We all, whether you're in healthcare or not, there can be long wait times in the emergency department. So we have a new committee, and we come to the committee, and it used to always frustrate me years ago before I was enlightened, Tom. It always used to frustrate me. The head of quality, the physician leader in charge of quality, always used to start the meeting by saying, what problem are we trying to solve? And I would think to myself as a less experienced leader, the name of the committee, we all know the problem. And it didn't take me long to learn. Everyone came to the committee meeting with, yes, they want to solve the throughput issue, but they came to it through their lens and their role, whether it was someone in environmental services, someone in physician staffing, nursing staffing, the emergency department, the floors, the leaders on the inpatient beds. Everybody was trying to solve the problem as it related to them. So seeking to clarify and asking more reflective questions gives you the specific information you need to do just what you want to do. You want to learn and you want to help, right?
Yeah.
And I used that word learn very intentionally. All of your questions, they're awesome. So those listeners who want to get better, these are great practice. These are great questions for you to get better at asking questions. But each one of them results in learning of some kind, learning as the leader and the person asking the question, and then obviously the person you're communicating with. And I always quote two of my favorite leadership researchers, Dr. Barry Posner and Jim Kouzes, co-authors of the Leadership Challenge. And they always say that the best leaders are the best learners. And learning doesn't just come from reading books or articles, but learning comes from other people. And when you ask the questions, it gives you an opportunity, both of you, to learn.
Absolutely. There's so much there. One is this idea of questions. And so there's a book that I read some time ago. Are the 10 tips that I gave from that. Maybe some of them are. I can't say that for certain. But anyway, this book, it's called The Book of Beautiful Questions by Warren Berger.
Oh, wow.
And I think I would recommend that to anybody.
I'm writing that down.
Who's looking to get better at asking questions there, because it really is a treasure trove of great questions. And We'll include a link to that in our show notes in the description. So that's the one thing that, as you were talking, just think about the questions and because there's so many that are possible, and it's just knowing it's like a key. You're just trying to find the right key. The second thing is Barry Posner, Jim Kouzes, we've mentioned on the show before, Leadership Challenge, Engaging the Heart, a number of their books that are excellent. Barry Posner and he helped me with a research paper I did. We published in 2023. And then Jim Kouzes, I'm hopeful will be on The Science of Leadership in the not too distant future. So we're in the process of discussing that. So hopefully he'll be coming on and sharing some of his insights on that. So anyway,
great.
Well, Lori, I think we've had a great discussion. I really, really appreciate your, taking the time to have this conversation with me. Thank you for being a guest on The Science of Leadership.
My pleasure, Tom. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.